Welcome to the Islamic Library Association. We are dedicated to showcasing Muslims' rich contributions to literature and society while advocating for accurate representation and equity in libraries. Hello and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Khalisah Harris. I am a librarian and the founder of the Islamic Library Association. We advocate for equity in libraries and public spaces, making sure Muslims are represented accurately, respectfully, and with the depth they deserve, while also highlighting the lasting contributions Muslims have made and continue to make to literature. In this interview series, we talk with library professionals and allies who recognize the importance of Muslim representation in libraries and work to strengthen it. Together, we explore how inclusion, accountability, and intentional practice shape more equitable library spaces for everyone. Today, I am honored to introduce our guest, our ally, Ms. Carol Nicol. Carol is an early career librarian with decades of prior work experience, having completed her degrees as a mature learner. She began her library career specializing in online resources in South Carolina and now works in adult services in Oklahoma City. She's passionate about uplifting diverse voices, including Muslim representation in collections and programming, and loves learning from different cultures, often through cuisine. Carol is committed to true diversity, equity, and inclusion in her work. Thank you so much, Miss Carol. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Khalisah. I hope you're doing as well as I am.
Well, I appreciate you for joining us. So let's just go right on ahead and get started. As a librarian, do you feel there's a clear distinction, taught or understood, between faith, race, and culture?
I don't think that there is, unfortunately.
Based on your experience, do you think Muslims are accurately represented in library spaces?
Sometimes, usually better represented in the children's and young adult areas than the adult areas. The adult areas oftentimes, especially in fiction, go and make a point of dealing with Islamists instead of Islam and Muslims.
I definitely agree with that. What you do know about Muslim communities, did you learn it in library school, through face-to-face encounters with Muslims, or through your own research?
Mostly through face-to-face encounters and also a little bit through my own research.
Okay. Have you found that your research has helped you when you have those face-to-face encounters with Muslims?
Sometimes I think it's important for a person of a different culture to instead of just asking any and all questions and making it the responsibility of the other person to instruct, do your research first. And then with well, I read this. What is this right? And I don't think I understood this part, and go from there.
I agree 100% with at least asking questions with some type of understanding, or questions from something that you have learned or read or something like that, to show that you've had interests and really want to know, opposed to just expecting the other person to just automatically teach you everything you need to know in that moment. How do you personally approach the lack of diverse voices by authentic Muslim authors, whether it's in your collections or programming?
Well, I researched the collection, to, just kind of get ideas. Unfortunately, I'm not in collection development, so anything that I have has a little bit more weight than maybe a library guest would, as far as suggestions. But Not as much as if I was in a collection development. I do help with doing events in the library.
Mhm.
And one of my first events at my new library, since I've just moved over to a new system, is going to be presenting the Great Muslim American Road Trip, which is a PBS series, and it's about a young millennial Muslim couple that traveled the historic Route 66. Luckily, my library is currently doing a big event focus on Route 66. And I'm like, okay, well, I've got something for that.
That's very nice that you're actively including Muslims in something that the library is already doing within its own system.
Yes.
You said previously how you've had online resources. That's primarily what you
Mhm.
have done before.
Yes.
With those online resources, did you find within any age category, whether it's children's, young adult, or adult, did you find a lot of resources that had accurate representation of Muslims in those resources?
The larger resources has a good variety of Muslim resources, but again, it's kind of unbalanced. It's more evenly balanced between, oh, they're all jihadists and hey, listen, regular people that that have different cultures and a different religion than most do. So it's kind of an even line with the big resources such as Hoopla or Libby. But when you're getting to the smaller resources, it's just the wild, wild west out there. It really is. Because a lot of the smaller online resources do independent publishing, and independent publishing can be a mess. It can be great, but it can also be a mess.
So there's no order or system to ensure that the resources that are included are equitable or accurate? Because you mentioned how it has a lot of jihadist information in there.
Yes,
So that wouldn't be an accurate representation of Islam as if we're all going out to
yes.
jihad or something like that. During your tenure of doing that type of work specifically, were there any guidelines to ensure that the information was accurate or equitable to information that did not discuss Muslims specifically or Islam?
In a way, libraries tend to try to get some balance. Now, some libraries do better than others. And as a whole, I think that libraries are pretty good at weeding out the worst of the worst. But unfortunately, and also fortunately, every book its reader, and every reader its book. It holds true, and there are some people that would want to read things about how horrible another culture is, and whether it's true or not. Same thing with maybe reading Amish fiction. I don't think that most of the writers of Amish fiction are in fact Amish.
Exactly. So that's a lot of yeah, those
But
those voices are not authentically Amish people writing.
mhm.
Hmm.
But then in the younger groups, they have picture books. In our library, we have several picture books about faith, and the Muslim faith in particular. Young girls wearing the hijab for the first time. There are picture books about that. Um, for the really younger kids, it's about looking forward to maybe an older sister um,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
taking on the that form of dress.
Yes, there are some books. Let's go back a little bit when you were saying how people will read things that are not good about other cultures. That's
Mhm.
okay. I think everyone should read or even write for that matter what they want to. However, if only those types of books are accepted more than the accurate, authentic voices of Muslims, or for people to understand the difference, there should be joyful stories, everyday lifestyle stories, and also stories of Muslims specifically in America. A lot of the books that I have read or are aware of that are in libraries when they're talking about Muslims, oftentimes is about Muslims in another country.
Mhm.
So the lifestyle and even the culture looks different. But of course, even within one country, the culture is different in different regions, just like there may be different interests based upon the culture that they're in, regardless of their faith or their race. But I do think that there is a note to make to be able to distinguish the difference of people enjoying to write or read a certain thing. Those books are easily and readily available. But when it comes to the regular lifestyle of authentic voices of Muslims that ultimately represent Islam, because you're going to have a Muslim author that did not write a book about Muslim life.
Yeah.
The same way a Muslim can read a book that might not be about Muslim life. So there are misconceptions that are displayed throughout a lot of the literature that is available, while there are so many barriers of getting those authentic voices within the libraries. For example, when we're talking about Ramadan, for example, well, a lot of libraries have a lot of Ramadan books. But
Mhm.
then when it's only Ramadan books or primarily Ramadan books, not that that's a problem that Ramadan books are there, but it does condense the Muslim life experience into just 1 month of the whole year. That's equivalent to if every library primarily just had Christmas books. That's
Yeah.
condensing someone's life just to that Christmas day, opposed to the variations and the lived everyday typical experiences. And we know that those voices are marginalized within a marginalization within libraries because just simply the way collection development is done, when they typically choose from the top 5 publishing companies through their distributor. Not that that's a problem, but if the publishing companies are not selecting those authentic Muslim voices manuscripts, then that's a huge barrier right there. And then when we're talking about self-publishing, most libraries do not accept self-published books when a lot of the Muslims are self-published because their books are not getting picked up by those top 5 publishers. What are your perspectives on things such as that?
I agree with the top 5 publishers. They are trying to diversify their works, not just inclusive of Muslims, but women and people of color. I'm a heavy reader of science fiction, but science fiction is rife with heterosexual, cisgendered, male, white writers. But it's getting better. And to some extent, it's the reader's responsibility to look for diverse voices. So I read a lot of Afrofuturism now. I feel like libraries have the responsibility to include that in their collections, and I feel that that the library systems that I've been with, even the smaller one in South Carolina, and also the larger system that I'm in Oklahoma right now, have included a lot of diverse voices. Now, what I will say is the current system that I'm in, it's easier to find. And that is something that's directly the responsibility of the library systems, and the catalogers to
Mhm.
make sure that things are tagged properly, and to make sure that if somebody has an interest in Muslim or Islam literature, they can actually find it. And not just because the word appeared somewhere in the book. And I think that to a certain extent, the library that I'm with now does a better job with that. Not only having a greater amount of literature, but making it easier to find and to find the accurate things.
Yes, I do agree with tagging needing to really be up to par, but the book has to be selected before it can even be tagged. The
Hmm.
catalogers can't tag a
True.
book that they cannot acquire. Like you said, the it's the library's responsibility to make sure that the catalogers have access or the ability to be able to choose books and select books that accurately represents Muslims because there's many avenues that are taken to be able to receive books that are anti-Islamic or have
Hmm.
inaccurate representations of Muslims. So with this gap that we're discussing when it comes to accurate Muslim representation within libraries, can you remember when you first noticed that there was such a gap?
I feel like that I noticed this gap probably about a decade ago when I was talking with a friend of mine who's from Bosnia and is also a Muslim. I asked her, what are some of your favorite books? And I hadn't heard of any of them. Now, granted, a lot of them are only available in translation for it into English. But I don't understand Bosnian. Sorry. But so many of these books, when I researched, I found out that I couldn't find them at any library in translation or otherwise, even though they are available in translation. They were with smaller publishers, and I was like, well, why?
Yeah.
It's not that there aren't these works of literature and history out there. It's just that they're not widely available in the West. And I looked for a few of her suggestions and read them. Weren't really my cup of tea, but they were very well written, and I feel like they would have a place in a library and should.
I agree, but that's still Bosnia.
Mhm.
What about the Muslims born and raised here in America?
Yeah, again, I see things in the children's department, and I've done some research into that. It's like so much literature for children. It's the Muslim child integrating into an American culture and presenting their own culture, their own religion to their friends. It seems like there's really two facets. Either completely ignore the fact that Islam exists, or look into at how it can integrate into the culture over here. Not much in between.
Again, that's integrating a different culture. Okay, so I was born and raised Muslim. I was
Hmm.
born in America. So my story is my culture is American culture.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna have a Bosnian story. I'm not gonna have an African story. I'm not gonna have an Arab story. I'm not gonna have nobody else's story. So again, it's that's a huge gap in itself to imply with the literature that you're from somewhere else if you're Muslim. So just to go back a little bit, you mentioned earlier how there was white men who were the primary authors and things like that. A lot of the literature came from that perspective. Okay, but there's white Muslims. That's never told either. So I don't think it's just a culture thing or just a race thing or only a no, it's a Muslim thing because we show white people in books, we show different faiths in books, including Muslims. The largest racial group of Muslims in America are African Americans. You don't
Mhm.
see that. When you're looking at the books that are available in the library, it's very Arab cultured, not even including the Arabs that were born and raised in America. Their culture is not shown because their culture is not going to look like the culture if they were out in the East somewhere. There's just a lot of different gaps. So, from all those gaps, can you tell us a story about when you tried to create a LibGuide? You created some LibGuides and then you tried to make another one for the Muslims. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that?
I didn't find enough to create a LibGuide with the areas of my expertise.
Mm,
Basically, the online resources weren't there. The print resources weren't there, and I found some very Islamophobic literature on one of the smaller independent sites that my old library carried. I just didn't find enough to do justice to a LibGuide. There would just wasn't enough to compile and catalog. I was looking into a LibGuide for Muslim literature that was available through the library system that I was with down in South Carolina. No. My work is mainly with adults, so it was even harder with that. And in the children's librarians that I tried to, collaborate with, they just really weren't able to help much either because it wasn't really at the top of their mind. It
yes.
wasn't a literature that they were particularly familiar with.
Ultimately, you were speaking and trying to collaborate with other coworkers to see how
Hmm.
you all could come together to try to come up with something. And despite those efforts, it just never really worked out because there was not enough to create a LibGuide. Could
Hmm.
you explain what a LibGuide is for the listeners who may not know what a LibGuide is?
It's kind of a combination of a list and telling you more about what's in the list, and where to find the materials to research further, and that's really where I fell down in trying to create a LibGuide for Muslim literature that was available in my system at the time.
I understand. Advice would you give to librarians who want to make their collections or LibGuides or programs more inclusive of the Muslim community? What advice would you give them?
I would say do your research, find out what's good, what's out there, and try to figure out how you could use what you already have in your system and build on that collection, just like any other collection where there may not be enough resources.
Are there
Um,
any
I would actually suggest something that I recently read about, which is basically doing a cultural audit of the collections, and that was something that I learned through my new library system, and something they're looking at doing. Yay!
Yes, the diversity audits are amazing guides to find out what you can get rid of and what you need to get more of or start getting more of within the collections. And the collections really tend to have a huge impact on everything else that goes on in the library, whether it's the programs or whatever it is. The collections are oftentimes the primary origin of the ability to do more. Are there any practical strategies that you have found effective when it comes to promoting Muslim voices in libraries?
Yes, I find that knowledge is key for one thing. Recognize and make sure that your colleagues recognize the different cultural diversity that's out there. Just for example, like I said, I've been going ahead and getting together a community event where I'm going to be showing the Great American Muslim Road Trip. Well, just so happened that with your help, thank you, um, I was doing a little
Oh,
bit of research to find out when the prayers happen throughout the day. And so I did have a gentleman come in and borrow a room for an hour. We have study rooms, and one of my colleagues was a little bit perturbed because they noticed that he was kneeling. And I was like, no, don't worry about it. He's not breaking any of the library rules, like sleeping or lying on the floor, which could be misconstrued as are they asleep? Are they
mhm.
in distress? Are they dead? He was praying. I knew this because I had done the research, and it was time for evening prayer.
Okay.
So I just told my colleague, "Oh, no, no, leave them alone. I can tell what they're doing." But that little piece of information helped me know what was going on and know that it wasn't a problem in any way, shape, or form. Also, I do have a prayer break scheduled in the middle of 3 hours long of this mini series.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I
Because
think that's
while I
great.
do want a diverse audience, I hope it'll be of interest to members of the local mosques.
Yes.
Which, by the way, I noticed our local mosque, the one that's closest to the library that I work at, primarily African American.
Okay.
I saw their Facebook page, you can tell.
Uh, First of all, I think it's great. I know we've had this discussion previously, and we were talking about how to, check the prayer schedules and how to find them and things like that for the times that you're trying to do it. I think that's great. And I know even if many people don't come out and say it, I'm telling you, the Muslims would appreciate that very much. And it also brings awareness to how we are and what we do. Just like you were saying, some of your coworkers didn't know what they were doing in there. So,
Mhm.
that can create a whole clash, and, like, I'm not doing anything, I'm praying, you know? Uh, I know that you personally have mentioned to me about partnering with local mosques and things like that, but are you
Mhm.
aware of your library specifically partnering or collaborating with any Muslim communities within your county or district?
No, I am not aware of it, but I
Mhm,
am very new at my new library,
mhm.
and I have an appointment set up a day after tomorrow with our outreach area,
Oh,
and I have questions to ask them.
yes. Questions/suggestions.
Yes, questions/suggestions.
Yes.
Have you reached out to the local mosque? What can you tell me?
Mhm.
And have some of our branches that are closer to the other mosques in the area, have they had any activity?
That's great, that's great. Well, you're there, so I'm sure that if they haven't partnered, then, it may be going towards that direction, and that's great, definitely. If you could leave our viewers, especially librarians and library students, with one key message about inclusion and representation of Muslims, what would it be?
It would be, learn more about Muslims. Muslims are interesting people. Be interested in everyone, but
Mhm.
not overly curious, and save your questions until you've done some research. Like, mhm, you know, I,
Well, we are
I didn't just come
librarians,
up and
right?
say, "Hey, Khalisah, I'm going to be showing a Muslim movie, and can you tell me anything at all that I should know?" Well, no, I know about the prayer system. I just didn't know if the information on the internet, which you suggested to me, was going to be particularly accurate. You said, "Oh yeah, look here, it's gonna be right, it's not gonna be lies." And so I did. Don't expect other people to be your teacher, but be open to learning, when people are willing to teach you. Open up your ears.
So be observant is what I gather
Yes,
you're saying.
open up your ears, not your mouth.
I think that's great advice. I think especially as librarians and, students of librarianship in general, we primarily do research or learn how to do research and things like that. So it's not beyond our capabilities. It's not beyond things we have wanted to do professionally. That's why part of the reason why you become a librarian. So I love what librarians do and what librarians have the capability of doing. And with the Islamic Library Association, we just want Muslims to be included in the inclusion efforts. And so, on behalf of all the Muslims, I'm going to say thank you for at least observing, researching, and feeling comfortable to ask those questions when you have a genuine question. So, that is all I have for you tonight. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I cannot think of anything, not a single thing.
Yes.
Except that you forgot to mention that I've been a vegetarian for 26 years at this point. Uh, well, let's see, since
Did you say?
1999. So, yeah, 26, and it'll be 27 this November.
All right then. Well, congrats to you for that. That's a lot of dedication. 26 years.
So it means that I'm both kosher and halal by default, doesn't it? Because only meat needs to be blessed. Am I right about that?
You caught me so off guard with that. But that is good. So yes, yes. I mean, well, you'd have to have the presence of meat for it to be halal, but I get your point. You're not eating unhalal meat. So
Okay,
good
well
for
there
you.
you go.
Good for you.
See, now I've learned something beyond my research.
It just takes a little bit of
Once
conversation
again,
and observation. So, yes, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing about your continued success with collaborating with the Muslims within your area and helping libraries be more inclusive across the board.
thank you so much, and I will be keeping in touch.
All right. You have a good day.
All right,
Bye.
bye.
Join the Islamic Library Association, and together we can shape a more inclusive future for literature.